Hello from Halifax. This is Joe with Joe to the World Creations, and today we're going to be making my Bobble baby blanket crochet pattern. I'm so excited to share this crochet baby blanket pattern with you, and we're going to be getting right to the video tutorial. All of the details, such as the hook size, the amount of yarn required, and the step-by-step written instructions, as well as charts, are all available for free on my website, or you can purchase the print-ready, ad-free PDF, and there are links to both in the description below this video. All right, let's get started. We're going to start with the color that you'd like to use for the border. Now the border color actually gets separated into two skeins, and you'll want to separate these skeins or just purchase two and use two skeins. You want to do this before beginning the pattern. The first skein is called A1, which is the border color skein number 1, and then the second skein is A2, which is still the same border color, but it's the second skein. And you can read about the exact amounts of yarn required for both of these in the written instructions. With color A1, we are going to start by making a slip knot. Once your slip knot is made and securely on your hook, we can begin. To make the blanket the same size that I did, that's in the written instructions, you're going to chain 108. You can also adjust the size by making more or less starting chains in multiples of 12. I'm going to be making a small sample of this blanket for the video tutorial, so I'll be chaining 48. But if you're making the size that's in the written instructions, chain 108 and come back to the video. With our starting chains now made, we can begin row 1. We're going to continue using this skein for the border color, A1, until instructed to change colors. To begin row 1, we're going to work into the second chain from the hook. So this is the first, that's the second, and we're going to work into the back ridge loops, which are these bumps along the back. So working into the second back ridge loop from your hook, we are going to slip stitch very loosely. So we're going to insert our hook into the bump along the back, and then we are going to yarn over and pull our yarn through the stitch or the chain and also through the loop on our hook, making a very loose slip stitch. In the next chain, we're going to half double crochet. And these could be tight, take your time, and half double crochet in the next chain. And we're going to repeat this all the way across until there is one chain left. So in the next chain, we're going to slip stitch very loosely. And the reason we're making these slip stitches very loosely, do you see how loose mine is? You want it to be as loose as possible because we're going to be working into that slip stitch in the next row. So I've just made a slip stitch. In the next chain, I'm going to half double crochet and continue doing this all the way across. So simply repeating slip stitch very loosely and half double crochet in the next chain all the way across until there is one chain left. Then come back to the video and we will do that together. So I've just slip stitched, half double crocheted in each chain across, and I have one chain left. So you should have one chain left. The stitch before your last chain should be a half double crochet. And in this last chain, we are going to make a slip stitch loosely. Working still into that back ridge loop, into the back bump there, we're going to insert our hook and slip stitch. At the end of row 1, you should have a total of 107 stitches. In this pattern, every single row has the exact same number of stitches, and there's always going to be 107 stitches. Or if you've adjusted the size, it's going to be one less than your number of starting chains. So in this example, I chained 48 and I have 47 stitches. And chains in this pattern never count as stitches. To begin row 2, we are going to chain 1 and turn. For the rest of the pattern, you are always going to work into the first stitch. The first stitch is the stitch that's attached to the chain. So this is the stitch that you will always work into as the first stitch in every row. Another thing that you're going to do for the rest of the pattern is anytime you see a slip stitch from the previous row, you are going to make a half double crochet into that slip stitch. Whenever you see a half double crochet from the previous row, you're going to slip stitch into that. But let's do that together now. So the instructions for row 2 begin with half double crochet in the next stitch. Since we always know to work into the first stitch, we will half double crochet into the first stitch, which is the top of the slip stitch from the previous row. So half double crochet into that first slip stitch. In the next stitch, we're going to slip stitch, and that's a half double crochet from the previous row. So slip stitch in the next stitch. And we're simply going to repeat that all the way across the row. Half double crochet in the next stitch, slip stitch in the next stitch until there is one stitch left. So I've just made a half double crochet stitch. My next stitch will be a slip stitch, and always work your slip stitches loosely because we're always going to work into them in the next row. So the next stitch will be a half double crochet and then slip stitch, and always make your slip stitches loosely. So you go ahead, repeat half double crochet, slip stitch, half double crochet, slip stitch, all the way across until there is one stitch left, and then come back to the video. So I've just finished repeating half double crochet, slip stitch all the way across. So my last stitch before the last stitch in the row was a slip stitch. In the last stitch of the row, we're going to make a half double crochet. In that last stitch, half double crochet. Just a reminder, every row has 107 stitches, or one less than your number of starting chains, and chains never count as stitches. To begin row 3, we are going to chain 1 and turn. The instructions for this row say to slip stitch in the next stitch and half double crochet in the next stitch. We know that we always work into the first stitch, so into that first stitch we are going to slip stitch. And reminder, every time you slip stitch, make it very, very loosely. So into this first stitch, slip stitch, in the next stitch, half double crochet, and we're going to do this all the way across until there's one stitch left. So slip stitch in the next stitch, and the next stitch, half double crochet. You go ahead and repeat slip stitch in the next stitch, half double crochet in the next stitch, all the way across until there is one stitch left. So I've just finished slip stitching in the next stitch, half double crochet stitching in the next stitch. I have one stitch left. Into this last stitch, we're going to make a slip stitch. Now you're going to do row 4, which is repeating row 2. Then for row 5, you'll repeat row 3, and for row 6, you'll repeat row 2. And after you've finished row 6, come back to the video and we will do row 7 together. I've just completed row 6, which was repeating row 2, and now I'm ready to begin row 7. To begin row 7, we're still using the same skein of yarn that we've been using this entire time, and with the same skein of yarn, we're going to chain 1 and turn. What we're going to do first is slip stitch in the next stitch, which is the first stitch, the stitch that's attached to the chain, and half double crochet in the next stitch. And we're going to repeat those instructions 3 times, which means we're going to do slip stitch, half double crochet, slip stitch, half double crochet, slip stitch, half double crochet. And at this last half double crochet is when we are going to change colors. But let's do this first part before the fun really begins. So in the very first stitch, we're going to slip stitch, loosely of course, in the next stitch, half double crochet. So that's completing the instructions once. Let's do it again, slip stitch in the next, half double crochet in the next, that's 2. Now we're going to repeat those instructions one last time, but we're going to pause at that last half double crochet. So next is to make a slip stitch in the next stitch. And now during this last half double crochet is when we're going to change colors. So I'm just going to pause on this for a moment because I want to get the color out that I'm going to be using for the blanket body. In this pattern, this color is referred to color B. So whatever you want to use for the blanket body, get that ready to go. In all the pictures that you saw for this blanket, I used white as the blanket body, but for this video tutorial, I'm using this pink color, which is another size 3 yarn, but just so that it's easier to see. One other thing to note is that this row, row 7, is a right side row, meaning that the front of our work is facing us. And you can always tell which way is a right side row by where the starting tail is. When the starting tail is on the left, that means it's a right side row. And when the starting tail is on the right, that means it's a wrong side row. So for this one, it's a right side row. So when we change colors, we're gonna want any strands to be hanging along the back of our work. So I have my color B handy here, and now I'm going to make the last half double crochet stitch. That was part of the first set of instructions that we need to follow. So I'm going to make the start of it just normally. So I'm yarning over, inserting my hook into the next stitch, yarning over and pulling up a loop. So I have 3 loops on my hook. Now I'm going to take the color that I've been using, which is A1, the first skein of the border color, and I am going to leave it hanging along the wrong side of my work. So it's hanging in the back. Now I'm going to take my color B and I'm going to place it onto my hook. And now I'm going to pull color B through the 3 loops that are on my hook, the 3 loops that were made with A1. So I'm leaving enough of a starting tail here that I can weave in these ends at the end. My color B's on my hook, and I'm simply going to pull color B through all 3 loops to complete my half double crochet stitch, but also changing colors. Now I'm going to tighten everything up, just pulling these loose strands so everything's nice and tight. And I'm ready to begin the next set of instructions. I'm going to place my color A1 here over to the side so that's not in the way. But we're not fastening off from A1, we're leaving it attached to the skein, and we're going to pick it back up on the next row. Now with color B, we're simply going to single crochet all the way across until there are 6 stitches left. For those following the pattern exactly, that is 95 single crochet stitches that we're going to make using color B. So working into the next stitch, we're simply going to single crochet, and it's really loose right now, but I can easily tighten everything once I've made my stitch here. So I've just made my first single crochet stitch here, and I'm going to single crochet across the next 95 stitches. If you're making the full blanket or the blanket that's in the written instructions, or if you're making it a different size, then until there are 6 stitches left. So you go ahead and do that all the way across and come back when you have one last stitch to go, and we will do the last single crochet stitch together. So I've just single crocheted with B all the way across. Here are my remaining 6 stitches, and I'm on my very last single crochet that I need to make before those last 6 stitches. And at this point, I am going to get out and get handy or ready A2, which is the second skein of the border color. So now I have my A2 handy and ready to go. So on my last single crochet that I'm making before those last 6 stitches, I'm going to start the single crochet normally, but then I'm going to change colors on this last stitch here. So I'm going to insert my hook, yarn over, and pull up a loop. So I have 2 loops on my hook. I'm going to leave color B hanging along the back, and I'm going to pick up the second skein for the border, A2, and place it on my hook, leaving enough of a starting tail so that I can weave in the ends at the end of the blanket once I'm finished the blanket. So I've just placed it on my hook, and now I'm going to pull A2 through the loops, the 2 loops of B that are currently on my hook. So I'm just going to pull it through, which is I'm finishing this last single crochet stitch, and I've changed colors. Once again, it's very loose, but it will tighten up as we move forward. All my loose strands are on the back of my work, hanging along the wrong side. And now I have the color A2 on my hook, and I can finish these last 6 stitches. I'm just going to tighten everything up, and you can do this now and once you've made your stitch. And for these last 6 stitches, we are going to be repeating half double crochet in the next stitch, slip stitch in the next stitch, times 3. So the next stitch, we're going to half double crochet, and it is loose, so I'm just tightening everything up a little bit. We can tighten it up even more once we weave in our loose ends at the end. So there's my first half double crochet. Now I need to make a slip stitch in the next stitch, and always make it loosely. And so I've repeated the instructions in brackets 1 time, but we're going to do it a total of 3 times. So in the next stitch, half double crochet, and in the next stitch, slip stitch, and finally half double crochet, and in the last stitch, slip stitch. And at the end of row 7, and it's the same for every row in this pattern, you should have the same number of stitches as you did for the previous rows, which is 107 stitches. So now let's begin row 8. So we're using A2, which is the second skein for the border color. With A2, we are going to chain 1 and turn. And this is where I always take a minute and just adjust all my skeins so they aren't crossed over. Row 8 is a wrong side row. You can tell from the starting tail, since it's on the right, that means it's a wrong side row. And also all the strands are facing us. Right here, I have A2 attached to my work, and over here I have A1. So the second skein for the border, the first skein, both attached. And I have B here as well, that's also attached. Now with row 8, what we're going to do next, we're still working with our A2, we are going to half double crochet in the next stitch and slip stitch in the next stitch times 3. So in this first stitch, half double crochet, and in the next stitch, slip stitch. We're going to do that a total of 3 times. So in the next stitch, half double crochet, and in the next stitch, slip stitch, and in the next stitch, half double crochet, and in the next stitch, we're going to slip stitch, but I want to show you how to change colors on a slip stitch. To change colors on a slip stitch, we are going to insert our hook into the next stitch, the stitch that we're making the slip stitch in. But first, I'm just going to take the yarn, the A2 yarn, and put it in front of me like this, and I'm just going to hold it down with my thumb. So I'm going to insert my hook into the next stitch where we're going to make our slip stitch. And what I'm going to do is just pick up B. So I'm just picking it up, it's attached to my work, and I'm going to place it on my hook. Okay, just hooking it. You might need to use your hands to just keep it in place. And then I'm going to pull this through the stitch and through the loop on my hook. I'm just going to do this again so that you can really see. So I have a loop on my hook with A2. I've got B in my hand here. So I'm going to insert my hook into where I want to make the slip stitch, place B on my hook, pull it through the stitch, and pull it through the loop on my hook. And that's how you change colors on a slip stitch. So we're going to leave A2 hanging along the wrong side of our work. So it's facing us on this row. We're not going to fasten off. You just put that aside. We're now working with B, and we're going to single crochet in each stitch across until there are 6 stitches left. And now it's going to be much easier to see those 6 stitches left because we've already done the side of the border once. So in the next stitch, we're going to single crochet, and you're simply going to single crochet all the way across until there are 6 stitches left. If you're following the pattern exactly, that's 95 single crochet stitches. Come back to the video when you're on the stitch before the 6 stitches left, and we will change colors together. I'm on my last stitch before the remaining 6 stitches in the row, and I'm going to change colors on this last stitch, and I'm going to change back to A1, which is the border skein 1. So that's still that skein is still attached to my work. It's just been hanging here. So I'm going to pick that back up midway through my single crochet stitch. So into the next stitch, I'm inserting my hook, yarning over, pulling up a loop. I have 2 loops on my hook. I'm now going to take B and put it in front of my work because this is a wrong side row. And I'm going to pick up, see how A1 is attached to the skein here. I'm picking it up and I'm going to place it on my hook and I'm going to pull it through the 2 loops of B that are also on my hook. So I'm pulling that through the 2 loops of B, tightening everything up. Leave B hanging. And now I've just changed colors and I can work with A1 for the last 6 stitches. To finish row 8, working with A1, in the next stitch we are going to slip stitch. In the next stitch we're going to half double crochet. In the next stitch, slip stitch, then half double crochet, slip stitch, the next stitch, and in the last stitch, half double crochet. You can already see, even with just 2 rows of single crochet stitches completed in between the built-in border here, that the shape of the blanket becomes a little uneven. And the reason for this is that the single crochet stitches have different heights and different tightness than the slip stitches and half double crochets. So this unevenness can be resolved when you wet block your finished blanket. So don't worry too much if you notice some unevenness, that it's not completely straight, or if the borders become a different size than the body. This can be resolved once you wet block your finished blanket so that these single crochet stitches stretch out a bit. I found that as soon as I wet blocked my blanket, it became a perfect shape. So the majority of the pattern is repeating row 7 and row 8. I'd like to repeat row 7 with you one more time because I want to do it without having to attach new yarn during the row. So I'm just going to do a repeat of row 7, which is row 9. So row 9 is repeating row 7, but let's just do that quickly together. So with A1, we are going to chain 1 and turn. And this is where things get crisscross. Take a moment just to organize my yarn. The first thing we'll do is slip stitch in the next stitch and half double crochet in the next stitch. Slip stitch in the next, half double crochet in the next, slip stitch in the next stitch, and then we're going to half double crochet on the last stitch and also change colors. So I'm going to yarn over, insert my hook into that last stitch, pull up a loop. I have 3 loops on my hook. I'm going to pick up B, place B on my hook and pull it through all 3 loops. Tighten everything up and now single crochet all the way across until there are 6 stitches left. You go ahead and do that and come back to the video. I have 1 stitch left before the 6 border stitches. So in this last stitch, I'm going to start my single crochet, yarn over, I have 2 loops on my hook. I'm going to leave B hanging along the back because this is a right side row, and I'm going to pick up A2, which is attached to my work here, and I'm going to put the strand of yarn on my hook and pull it through the 2 loops of B. So now that you've attached A2 and you're going to be working with A2 for the rest of the 6 stitches, if you tighten everything up, you may find that the first stitch is very hard to see. There's a stitch in here that you are going to half double crochet into. It's this stitch here. So just note that you absolutely have 6 stitches to work into. Just this first stitch is very, very small. So what I found is just pull your work apart a little bit and make sure you're working into that first of 6 stitches. So into this first stitch, we're going to half double crochet, and it's a very tight stitch. And then at that point, you can tighten everything up again. In the next stitch, slip stitch. In the next stitch, half double crochet. In the next stitch, slip stitch. The next stitch, half double crochet. And in the last stitch, slip stitch. That was just row 9, which was repeating row 7. Next, you're going to do row 10, which is repeating row 8, then row 11, which is repeating row 7, row 12, which is repeating row 8, and then row 13, which is repeating row 7. So go ahead and do all that, come back to the video, and we are going to do our first row of bobbles together, which begins on row 14. I've just completed row 13, which was repeating row 7, and I wanted to quickly point out that in between each row of bobbles, you will have 7 rows of single crochet. So that's an easy way for you to keep track of where you are in the pattern. So there's 7 rows completed of single crochet, but of course with the border sides, and then we do a row of bobbles. If you want to follow along the pattern chart, and this is the close-up version of the pattern chart, there's also the full version, you'll see that we've completed 7 rows of single crochet stitches, and we're about to start our first row of bobbles. The rows of bobbles are very, very similar. The only difference is how many crochet stitches are made between the side of the border and the first bobble. So when we make the row that we're just about to do, we're going to be single crocheting 5 times in between the side of the border and the first bobble. But when you go to make your next row of bobbles, and there's again 7 rows of single crochet stitches in between, but the only difference is that there'll be 11 single crochet stitches that you'll make before your first bobble, in between the side of the border and your first bobble. But then other than that, the rows are very, very similar. There's 11 single crochet stitches in between each bobble. But again, one of the only differences is the number of stitches between the last bobble and the side of the border. So when we finish this row, we'll have 5 single crochet stitches in between the last bobble and the side of the border. But the next time you go and repeat making bobbles, there'll be 11 single crochet stitches in between the last bobble and the side of the border. I'm going to show you how to complete the row of bobbles, and during this I'm going to note the differences between these rows so that when you come up to make that next row of bobbles, you'll understand how to do that. But I'm not going to go through the entire blanket with each color, because the written instructions really clearly lay out what color to use, and I hope by showing you this first row of bobbles and noting the difference between the two rows of bobbles, you'll be able to make the rest of the blanket. With all that said, let's get started making bobbles. This is row 14, but this row you can use to watch again when you come up in the pattern while you're following the pattern for other rows of bobbles. All right, the first thing we're going to do is we are using A2 right now. That's what color should be on your hook, A2, which is the second skein of the border. As I mentioned, I just completed row 13, which was repeating row 7, which was a right side row. So I have A2 on my hook, and with A2, I'm going to chain one and turn. I'm going to take a moment and get all my yarn organized. And when I say organized, I really mean just untwisted. So I have A2 on my hook right now. I have B ready to go. And then I have A1 that we'll use at the end. The last thing we need is our first bobble color. Or if you're watching this and you're making other bobbles with different colors, follow the instructions for what the written instructions say what color to use for this bobble. So since right now we're making the first row, we're using color C. So for this video tutorial, I'm going to use this blue color for color C. The first thing we're going to do, and we're working with A2 right now, we are going to half double crochet in the first stitch. In the next stitch, slip stitch. In the next stitch, half double crochet. The next stitch, slip stitch. In the next stitch, half double crochet. And now we're going to change colors on this last stitch, which is a slip stitch. So I'm going to bring my yarn towards me and hold it down with my thumb, pick up B, insert my hook into that stitch, put B on my hook and pull it through the stitch and the loop on my hook. So now we've just changed colors to B. As I mentioned when I was showing you the chart, you are either going to make 5 single crochet stitches, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or you're going to make 11, depending on which row of bobbles that you're working on. So right now we're working on row 14, which instructs us to make single crochet stitches in the next 5 stitches, and on the last stitch we're going to change to our bobble color. So let's quickly make 5 single crochet stitches. 1. Now, if you were working on a row that has the instructions begin with make 11, you do the exact same thing, just adjust the number of stitches. But once you get to your 11th stitch, you're going to do the exact same thing I'm about to do on this 5th stitch. So I've made 4 single crochet stitches, and on this next stitch, I'm going to change colors. So on my 5th stitch here, but this could also be your 11th stitch, you're going to do the exact same thing. Insert your hook into the stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, 2 loops on your hook. This is a wrong side row, so we're going to bring our yarn towards us so that the yarn's hanging on the wrong side. And you're going to pick up whatever color you'd like to use for the bobble, or whatever it says in the instructions. So right now it says to pick up or change to C, because that's the row we're on. But if it says change to D or E, you match those instructions with the color that you want for that bobble and follow along. So for this row, it says to change to C. So I'm going to pick up C, put it on my hook, and pull C through the 2 loops of B that are on my hook. Now, one thing is we want this end to be on the wrong side, which is facing us. And make sure you leave a long enough tail to weave in ends once you're finished. Now you can tighten everything up. And we are going to begin our first bobble. One thing that's really important is that we want color B to be on top of the next stitch, the stitch that we're going to make our bobble in. So I'm simply picking it up and putting it on top of the stitch, and we're going to crochet over it. So we're just pretending that it's a natural part of the stitch, and we're going to work directly over it. So do you see how this is the stitch we're working into? And I picked up B, and I'm just holding it in place over that stitch. Now we're going to make our first bobble. A bobble in this pattern is 5 double crochet stitches together, all made in the same stitch. So we're going to do this right now. To make our first bobble, we're going to yarn over, holding B over the stitch we're going to work in, which is the next stitch. We're going to insert our hook. And so you can see I have my hook in the stitch, but also over B that I'm holding over the stitch. Now I'm going to yarn over and pull up a loop. I have 3 loops on my hook. I'm going to yarn over and pull that yarn through the first 2 loops on my hook. 2 loops left on our hook, and that's the first of 5 double crochet stitches we're making together in the same stitch. Now we're going to do this again. Yarn over, insert our hook into the exact same stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, 4 loops on our hook. We're going to yarn over, pull the yarn through the first 2 loops. We have 3 loops on our hook. That's 2. We're going to do this a total of 5 times. So we've done this twice. Yarn over, insert your hook into the same stitch. I'm still holding B over the stitch that we're working on. Yarning over, pulling up the yarn. So now I have 5 loops on my hook. I'm going to yarn over, pull the yarn through 2 loops on my hook. 4 stitches left, or 4 loops left on my hook. Yarn over, insert the hook into the same stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 loops on our hook. We're going to yarn over, pull the yarn through 2 loops. We have 5 loops, so we've done this, and you can actually see it. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we've done it 4 times. We're going to do it 1 more time. Yarn over, insert the hook into the stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull that yarn through just the 2 loops on our hook. We now have 6 loops on our hook. And at this point, we're going to change back to B, which is the blanket body color. How we're going to do this is sorry, I just need to grab some more yarn here from my bobble color. I'm going to take the color I'm using for my bobble. I'm going to put it in front of my work because this is a wrong side. Just tightening everything up a little bit. I'm going to hold the color that I'm using for the bobble with my thumb here, and I'm picking up B, and I'm going to yarn over with B, and I'm going to pull it through all 6 loops on my hook. We've just made our first bobble. Now we can tighten everything up. We're going to work over our bobble color for the next 11 stitches. And actually all the way until the final bobble of the row, we're going to be working with both the bobble color and color B. So with the bobble color, you're going to place it on top of the next stitch. Just simply hold it in place, and we're going to crochet normally into the stitch, but we're going to work over that color. So into the next stitch, we're going to make our first of 11 single crochet stitches that we're going to make before we make the next bobble. So holding the bobble color over the next stitch, just going to simply single crochet. So you can see I've got my stitch and then the bobble color on my hook here, and I'm just going to single crochet normally with B. And I like to keep this quite tight. The bobble color, I just give it a little pull, and this is what it looks like on the other side. So that is our first of 11 single crochet stitches we're going to make across. So there's 1. In the next stitch, we're going to continue working over the bobble color. 1, so that's 2. And no matter what row you're on and whatever bobble color you're using, this is the exact same instructions. You always make 11 single crochet stitches between each bobble and work over the bobble color. When you get to stitch number 11, we're going to change back to the bobble color, and then we're going to make another bobble. So I've made 9 single crochet stitches so far, so I'm going to make my 10th. And then on my 11th, we're going to change back to the bobble color. So on this next stitch, we're going to start as we normally have been, still working over the bobble color, insert our hook into the stitch with the bobble color there, yarn over, pull up a loop, and at this point I'm going to bring B towards me, holding it with my thumb, picking up the bobble color, yarning over with it, and pulling it through the 2 loops on my hook. So now we have 11 single crochet stitches made, and we've changed back to our bobble color. Now let's make our next bobble. So with B, you want to hold that in place over the next stitch that we're going to make our bobble into, and we're going to make 5 double crochet stitches together in the same stitch. So yarn over, insert our hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull the yarn through 2 loops, yarn over, insert your hook into the next stitch, pull up a loop, 4 loops, yarn over, bring that yarn through 2 loops on your hook, 3 loops, so that's 2. I'm just going to do this a little faster now, and that's 3, 4, and 5. So you should have 6 loops on your hook. Now I'm going to bring my bobble color towards me, hold it there with my thumb, pick up B, the blanket body color, yarn over, and bring that yarn through all 6 loops. Pull everything tight, and now begin my next repeat of 11 single crochet stitches before the next bobble, working over the bobble color. So you're going to repeat with B, working over C, single crochet in the next 11 stitches. On the last stitch, change to your bobble color, working over B, make a bobble, and when you have those 6 loops on your hook, when you're about to be finished, the last step in the bobble, when you're almost finished it, that's when you change back to B and continue the repeat across. And you're going to do this across until there are 11 stitches left. What I mean by 11 is there should be 6 border stitches and then 5 single crochet stitches after your last bobble. And that's for row 14. And this is one of the areas where the rows of bobbles are a little different, because on the next time you make the bobbles, the instructions are going to say that there should be 17 stitches left, which means there'll be 6 border stitches and 11 single crochet stitches after your last bobble. You can go ahead and complete those instructions and come back to the video when you're on your last bobble. So I'm on my last stitch before the final bobble, and I'm going to change colors here. Bring B towards me, place the bobble color on my hook and yarn over, pull it through the 2 loops, and now working over B, make my last bobble. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Bring the bobble color towards you on the wrong side here. Pick up B and pull B through all 6 loops. At this point, you want make sure that your bobble color's on this wrong side, and you can fasten off. Leave enough room to weave in all your ends, and now you can finish the row. So with 5 stitches left, we're using B right now. We're going to single crochet in all 5 of those stitches. But you might also have 11 stitches if you're on the other row of bobbles. On the last stitch, whether it's the 5th or 11th, you're going to change colors. So we're going to change to A1 by picking it up, pulling it through our 2 loops, leave B hanging, and to finish the row we are going to slip stitch in the next stitch, half double crochet in the next stitch, slip stitch in the next, half double crochet in the next, slip stitch in the next, and in the final stitch, half double crochet. One thing I found helpful was I paused at about a quarter of the way through the blanket and at the halfway point and about 3/4 through the blanket. And at that point, I weaved in my loose ends from the first and last bobbles. And I found that really helped ensure that the yarn didn't get more tangled. And when you go to weave in the loose ends, just give it a little tug, make sure everything's tight, and just weave it into the back of the bobble. The row after a row of bobbles is always a row 7. So now it's a right side row. And it's exactly the same as all the repeating row 7s that we've done. Just wanted to just show you how to work into the bobbles. So I'm approaching a bobble. The stitch before the bobble is a B into B. So I'm just single crocheting into the B, which is a single crochet stitch. So working into the bobble, you'll want to single crochet. You single crochet normally, and you single crochet into the top loops of the bobble. So you just simply insert your hook into the top of that bobble, but I found you may need to just pay close attention to where you're working into, but it is the top loops, just the way you would do any other stitch. So you're going to single crochet normally into the top of that bobble. I'll just show you what it looks like. So inserting your hook under the top 2 loops, just single crochet. And that really concludes everything you need to know about this blanket. As you will see in the written instructions, the pattern repeats a total of 3 times. So you repeat the pattern once, and then twice, and then one more time. And why I'm showing this to you is because I thought it looked best if I did one more row of bobbles after my last repeat. So after the pattern repeated, I decided to do 7 more rows of single crochet and then a final row of bobbles that matched the first row. And that's what's in the written instructions. So after you complete your repeat, you're going to be doing 7 more rows of single crochet and then completing that first row of bobbles again. After this last row of bobbles, you are going to make 8 rows of single crochet stitches before starting the top of the border. Can we just pretend for a second that I've completed the entire blanket and I'm just about to start the top border? Your last row before starting the top border is a wrong side row. So once you've finished that last row in the pattern, it's row number 166. And at that point, and it says so in the pattern, what you're going to do is you're going to fasten off B. So you're going to just leave enough room to weave in the ends. But you're also at that point going to fasten off A2 because you're not going to need that anymore. For the rest of the pattern, you're going to be using A1, which is what you've ended the row on. So to start the top of the border, you'll simply chain 1 and turn. Still using A1, and you're going to be using A1 for the rest of the pattern. In the first stitch, we'll slip stitch and then half double crochet in the next stitch, and you're going to repeat slip stitch in the next stitch, half double crochet stitch in the next stitch, and you're going to repeat this all the way across. So we're used to doing this on the border, but now for this point, even into the single crochet stitches into the next stitch, you would slip stitch, and in the next stitch, half double crochet stitch, and you do this all the way across until there's 1 stitch left, and in the last stitch, you'll make a slip stitch. Then just like we did at the beginning, you will chain 1 and turn your work, and you're going to work a slip stitch into a half double crochet stitch and a half double crochet stitch into a slip stitch all the way across until there's 1 stitch left. And if you have any trouble with the top of the border, feel free to watch the beginning of this video again when we did the bottom of the border, because it's exactly the same. So continue following along with the written instructions. It'll tell you exactly what row to repeat. And once you've finished the blanket, all that's left to do is fasten off and weave in all your loose ends. And then just a reminder to wet block your finished blanket. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed making this blanket. I'd love to know what you think, if you have any questions, and I'd love to see your finished blankets. Thank you again and have a wonderful day.